Hey there, baseball fans. Nathan Rohde and Nick Morreale here for the latest episode of Coffee and Curveballs. Nick is joining us from Trackman at his offices in Denmark, so a very unique show for us today. But Nick, thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here. As Nathan said, we met at the Super 60 Showcase, met with you guys, had a great time, informed you guys a little bit about Trackman and our involvement in the showcase. And just here to touch on some of the players, some of the things I saw, and give a little bit of perspective from the numbers standpoint.
Yeah, for sure. No, we're looking forward to it. So today we'll talk a little bit about the players that stood out and some of the numbers that come along with them. We'll get on a podcast and we'll jump into a deeper dive into some of what some of those numbers mean. But for today, let's start off with Ben Hernandez, who was an obvious standout. It doesn't matter if you have the numbers or if you were just looking at him. It was clearly that he was one of the top pitchers there. But because of his performance, there are numbers to it. So for Hernandez, Nick, what stood out for you?
Well, certainly his effortless 95 miles an hour. I mean, the kid just stood up there and just, nice and calm, relaxed, picked out his spot, boom, 95, just like nothing. It was impressive to see. Spotting up his changeup, real good spin on his changeup, real good movement, nice separation in those two pitches, good arm slot. Like to see him develop a little bit on his curveball, but I think as he matures, he'll get a good pitching coach, and they'll get their hooks into him, and he'll develop that breaking ball just fine.
For sure, yeah, he's definitely a guy that was pretty effortless, and that changeup has always been there for him. Big time pitch. It's pretty dirty. So
yeah, that's an out pitch even as a changeup. So like I said, he gets one of those wipeout sliders and maybe a nice 12-6 curveball, and watch out, he's going to do some special things.
Indeed. So, but one of the big breakout guys that we've been talking about a lot over the last week plus is Dale Kata, the left-hander out of South Carolina. You mentioned by far the best bullpen, all-around bullpen that you saw. Tell me some of the stuff about Kata that jumped out for you.
Oh, I walked away from his bullpen with my jaw on the floor. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a high money offer come draft time. He spotted up his fastball, his changeup, wipeout breaking ball, two different breaking balls that he threw for strikes. Also located off of the plate when he wanted to. I think he was benefited by one of the better receiving catchers that were at the showcase. But I walked away from his bullpen just very impressed with that young man.
Excellent. Let's get into a little bit of pitching metrics here, just some quick hits. Obviously the power of Ben Hernandez stands out, the 94-95 that he was throwing. But when you look at those numbers and you dive into that data that you spit out after an event, who are some of the other guys that stood out for you and why?
Yeah, definitely some great spin rates, and without getting too far into the metrics details, we look for on one of our dashboards on what's separation. It's called separation and movement. You have movement on your fastball that generally moves arm side, and then your breaking ball moves across your body. And when we see lots of separation in those two pinpoints, that's when we know you really have some deceiving stuff. And Storm Heersholder, guy out of Texas, I believe, Trey Fromm, Nicholas Chittum, and Logan Wood, all three of them spun the living heck out of it. It was very impressive. Even spin rates, average spin rates up over 2,300, 2,400, 2,500 even, and breaking balls even up into the 2,700s, which is very impressive for kids these age. They're young guys, they're developing, and to have the mastery of the baseball like that is pretty impressive.
Indeed. So it wasn't all about pitching, obviously, at the Super 60. With the B1 unit, you guys are now also able to track balls off the bat, so you had it running during batting practice. Mackenzie Wainwright, again, like we talked about with Ben Hernandez, you didn't need any numbers to really tell you he was good just by watching him, but obviously he stands out as well from a metric standpoint.
Oh, strong body. On our graphic, we got him, basically, I wrote here, playing pepper with the 400 arc. He went over 400 a couple times, just under 400 3 or 4 times, but even his ground balls rollovers were 100 miles an hour. Great plate coverage, strong kid, good hands, very, very impressive. I didn't get a chance to see him throw from the outfield, but an overall good athlete. Really excited to see what happens with that young man. That's for sure.
Yeah, you mentioned those exit velocities. He was 104, 101, 97, 95. I mean, lots of big numbers coming off of his bat. But looking at some of those metrics like you did with pitching, who are a few of those other guys that kind of jumped out for you?
Yeah, big boy out of Arizona, Zaborowski. He's a strong kid, I believe third baseman. Remind me of like a Scott Rowland type, maybe even like Richie Sexton. Big bodied kid, dropped ahead. 8 out of 12 balls over 100 miles an hour. I should mention that we have trouble tracking foul balls and some balls down in the corners. So
sure.
We only got 12 out of his 16 hits. I'm not sure if those were foul balls or just pitches that we were unable to track. But 8 out of 12 over 100 miles an hour is still very
good.
impressive. I do want to mention that, the numbers don't track everything. This guy, Mark Black, he was in the first group, right-hand hitter, strong body. He didn't really impress with the metrics with a lot of hits over 100 miles an hour. Also very consistent right about that 97, 98 mark. Had real good rounds, consistent power. Guy Grant Knipp, I think catcher, also out of
Kentucky.
Kentucky, that's right. Big body catcher, swung the bat real well. Middle infielder Harold Call, real impressive overall showcase. Saw him with the glove, real confident, good arm, swung the bat well. Not a huge guy, but produced some good power numbers with a smaller frame. Real impressive.
Excellent.
Also, Ferragosi, Williams, Hodge, Kern, all those guys, we had some impressive numbers that stood out to me just by really looking at the iPad, just looking through the back of the numbers. I was working the whole time I was at the event, so I don't have the best memory of the guys and their body types and whatnot, but I can look back at the numbers and you can tell a ball player when you see them.
Yeah, for sure. Excellent. Well, that's an interesting look into some of those guys that were at Super 60 that stand out in the metrics. We look forward to jumping on a podcast and diving a little deeper. But, Nick, we appreciate you joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Nathan.
You bet. Well, for Nick Morreale, I'm Nathan Rohde. This was Coffee and Curveballs. And until next time, we'll see you guys at the ballpark.